So AEW has many wrestling fans abuzz about what they potentially have on tap for the not-too-distant future, next Sunday AD, and maybe just a little bit further out than that. Let's talk about some of this, shall we? I'm Charles Rentham with my real-on thoughts on AEW bringing in CM Punk and Daniel Bryan. Will they be in the title picture? Will they be in dream matches? Will they be a one and done? Where'd they come from? Where'd they go? Where'd they come from, Cotton Eye Joe? Good luck on hearing that goddamn song. And also the planned Kenny Omega versus Adam Hangman Page main event at All Out being scrapped. And Kenny Omega versus Wrestler X. That's going to be very weird because I don't think Wrestler X has wrestled or been alive for a while. But where does this leave Adam Hangman Page? When will they do the match? Full Gear? Further out? And also maybe a few other thoughts on some other AEW tidbits. Let me know your thoughts on these particular topics in the comments, please. This video will not go on too long, 25 minutes later. But I do have a lot of thoughts when it comes to these particular topics. Now, the whole CM Punk thing, I'll believe it when I see it, but there is about as much smoke and fire with this as there has been in a number of years. I mean, ever since he left after the 2014 Royal Rumble, he made his appearances in UFC, and let's be honest, even though he trained, it didn't work, but it did get them a lot of buzz. It got him some big paydays. He's been doing very well for himself. His merch has still been doing well. He's been in horror movies that, like Jacob's Wife, and one hardly needs to go on about that, and Girl on the Third Floor, and one really hardly needs to go on about that one, but good on him for being in these movies. So let's just start with CM Punk, since that's the one everybody wants to know. They dropped some hints on Dynamite, Darby saying, even if you think you're the best in the world. And I'm not going to get into like a huge discussion like, oh, what will CM Punk mean for AEW ultimately? He will obviously give them a big boost. They're heading to Chicago for Rampage, and then for All Out a couple weeks after that. Now, they really hyped up that AEW Rampage episode on August 20th. So if Punk doesn't at least appear in a video or appear in front of the live crowd, then I gotta say this, they're going to get a massive ratings boost there because people are going to want to see him there, and they're going to want, and the live audience, they're going to be pissed if they don't at least get some, strong indication that he is coming. If they swerve people on this, now I'm not saying they are, but if they swerve people on this, this is not going to end well. It's going to blow up in their goddamn face. You can't keep making promises, and under-delivering when it comes to some of the surprises. So I'm going to pivot away and give some examples. When Mark Henry came in, cool, he's going to be an announcer and, a coach and stuff like that. Paul White, I keep wanting to call him the Big Show because, well, it was the Big Show for quite a while. And he's an announcer and doing very well with Tony Schiavone. They hyped up this, free agent acquisition, and it turned out to be Christian Cage. And nothing against Christian Cage. It was cool with TNA Genesis 2005, but 2021 Christian Cage, while doing well, he's currently feuding with Matt Hardy, and I really don't want to, I really don't have any desire to see that. They've also been stop-start with him. I like this idea of him partnering with Jungle Boy and all that, but they've had varying, degrees of I guess, hype when it comes, and how they've delivered on this hype since these, various free agent signings have come in. All ego Ethan Page, he has his fans. I wasn't, too thrilled, but he is a good athlete, and he is a good addition for the roster. And there's been others, and they've done very well with some of these. Now, they haven't done well with all of them, because they do have a bloated roster, and even though they do have 2 YouTube shows, they started Dark Elevation in March, and that's the longer one. Then you have Dark, and they're going to be doing Rampage soon. They have their flagship show, Dynamite. More on that at the end of the video, because I have some things to say about that. They are doing what they can to try and juice things up, and bringing in a guy like Punk on name value alone will be a big deal. Now, can he still go in the ring? He's not old, but he hasn't been in, I think he made possibly one indie appearance, at some kind of ballroom or rec hall or whatever. He did something, that was it. He was tired of wrestling. He was burned out from wrestling. He was not feeling well. He said this on Colt Boom Boom Cabana's podcast, which that's going to be interesting when they bring Punk in, if they especially do, with the whole thing with him and Colt Cabana and that whole lawsuit that WWE did and all that. But let's just focus on what Punk brings to AEW. He brings name value. He is going to, for a bit, it's going to be a big boost because people are going to want to see him, and they more believe that Daniel Bryan was going to, stick to wrestling for a bit and just wrestle elsewhere and everything. And thankfully he is. He gets to live his dream. It's not as hard as it may seem. Got to work to get to create On Your Hopes You Must Lean. I really shoehorned that fucking reference. If you guys get that song reference, I love you guys. But with Punk, name value, he adds more than Daniel Bryan. And that's no disrespect to Daniel Bryan. I will praise Daniel Bryan a ton here in a bit. But CM Punk, nobody ever thought that he was going to come back. There were people that thought, oh, he might eventually. There were the CM Punk chants and stuff like that. They thought maybe he would come back at WrestleMania 30 as a surprise. No, he didn't. And eventually they fired him on his wedding day. And all that stuff and everything. And yes, he did WWE backstage, but it was a Fox contract, not a WWE one. He didn't look like he wanted to be there. That was an ill-advised return outside of, I'm sure, money. He just didn't really look like he wanted to be there. And it was also an overly scripted thing, even though it was supposed to be straight shooting, even though it wasn't. And now it looks like there's a good chance that he's going to show up in AEW. And again, if AEW swerves people, it's going to be bad. I think that Punk, here are like a few people he could face. Punk right now, or right then with a promo, he would match MJF because Punk is a master wordsmith. And he's great on the mic. Him and MJF would pretty much be the best promos. And there would be a few people underneath. I'm not saying there aren't some good promos, but MJF is clearly the best. And him and Punk having a promo battle, that it's shut up and take my goddamn money. Hook that. Just hook it to my veins. But who could he face? What value does he have in the ring? Who could he give the rub to? Who could he rub one out on? Gross. Best in the world. It's clobbering time. Anyway, moving on from that. Darby Allin, right away. Darby Allin, CM Punk. If they announce that on Rampage and they have that at All Out, that's a big deal. I will pop for that. That will be cool. The crowd's they're obviously going to love Punk more. They love Darby. Darby is very over with that audience. He's very over in Washington State. He's very over as far as what he does in the ring. Outside the ring, okay. But he definitely has that unique charisma where people are going to gravitate towards watching what he does in the ring and how he does and all the stuff that he does. Now, him versus Darby would be great. Punk versus Omega is almost a lock, and not for the title. Don't fucking do it for the championship. Punk doesn't need the goddamn championship. Even if he wrestled off and on since leaving WWE and, did the UFC stuff and whatever, even if he did that, he wouldn't need the title. He definitely doesn't need it now. He's going to be an attraction. Him versus Omega. Him versus Adam Hangman Page. Heel Punk versus, face Adam Hangman Page. Absolutely. And you could have Punk, team up with somebody, team up with Daniel Bryan against the Young Bucks. The Young Punks, if you will. And Punk and Bryan, even if they go half speed, would outshine the Bucks because, let's be honest, the Bucks are video game wrestlers and can have good matches on occasion and then just do their shit. But those are some matches. And also, Punk versus Jungle Boy. That's something. I wouldn't mind seeing Punk versus Kazarian, even though that's further down the list. No disrespect to Kazarian. But as far as a dream match, those are some dream matches I could see happening. And you could run Punk versus Daniel Bryan back on a big pay-per-view. You could do it at Full Gear. You could do it at Revolution next year. You could stretch it all the way out to Double or Nothing. You could do a lot of really good stuff here. Punk versus Kingston. Actually, I take that back. Now, Eddie Kingston might be, right below MJF or maybe right with MJF as far as promos. Promo battle alone and the way they work as far as their styles, that would be great. Punk versus Moxley would be cool. And yeah, you could do Punk versus Jericho. But their feud in 2012 was fine. It was fine. It wasn't, actually, that's unfair. It was actually not that bad. They did better at Extreme Rules because it was in Chicago. And how could you not love a hot Chicago crowd? But then you will get a lot of dream matches and he could work with some young guys. Punk versus Silver would be fun. There's a lot of really good potential stuff. It depends how often they use him and how long he's signed for. If he's only there for like a year, sure, you could have Punk versus Sting if you really want to. You could have Punk and Bryan versus Darby and Sting. Because they're currently paying Sting to do jack and shit. And Punk versus Orange Cassidy wouldn't be a match I would give a shit about, because I'm not really a fan of Orange Cassidy, as you know, but I recognize he is over with that audience, and he would get a big goddamn boost. So anybody else that I didn't mention, what of the people I mentioned who would you like to see Punk face? And who did I not mention on the AEW roster? Who would you like to see him face? And do you think Punk could maybe go to New Japan? Face Tomohiro Ishii, face Tanahashi. Provided the Tanahashi's knees don't explode before then. I love Tana. I'm really worried. Punk versus Okada. That would be something. So, now we're going to go to the Daniel Bryan portion. Daniel Bryan is going to wrestle in New Japan. He possibly will wrestle in Arena Mexico. He's got even more people he could work with. Because he could work face or heel. He just wants to keep wrestling. And he's going to do part-time stuff. Him in New Japan, you could have Ishii, Suzuki, if Suzuki's still wrestling, unless Suzuki retires in the next year. Bryan versus Okada, Bryan versus Tanahashi, Bryan versus Jay White. However I feel about Jay White, that would be a pretty damn good match. I don't know about him versus Evil. I wouldn't mind seeing. I mean, Bryan versus Yano would be interesting, just because Bryan's been known to do, be fine doing the comedy. And then there are obviously others in New Japan. I would not mind seeing Bryan versus Shingo. I don't think Punk versus Shingo would be as good. Bryan versus Cobb. Shut up and take my money right there. But let's go to AEW. Because he could wrestle in Arena Mexico. He could wrestle Laredo Kid. That'd be very good. He could team up with Punk and wrestle the Lucha Bros, which would be interesting. But Bryan versus either Penta or Phoenix. Bryan versus Omega, obviously a lock. Bryan versus Jungle Boy. Bryan mentoring Jungle Boy, teaming with Jungle Boy. That could be something. You could have Bryan versus Christian Cage if you really want to. I just don't think that there's any reason, because nothing against Christian Cage. I'll talk more about him in a little bit. But I think Bryan, Bryan versus Darby. Bryan teaming up with Punk against the Young Bucks. Bryan, maybe teaming up with Punk against the Good Brothers, home of the Good Brothers. Maybe we take your order. He could also go to Impact. He could face Eddie Edwards. He could face Dreamer. If Dreamer's going to be okay. I know Dreamer's been dealing with a lot of issues. He recently had the virus, and I'm choosing my words carefully, and I'm glad that he's okay, because he suffered through a lot in the ring and out of the ring, and I'm glad that Tommy Dreamer is seemingly on the mend and everything, and being able to continue to wrestle and everything. I just hope that he's going to be all right for the long term. But Daniel Bryan could face a plethora of people. He'd go to Ring of Honor. He could face Jay Briscoe. He could face Mark Briscoe. Face Jay Lethal. He could face a lot of people. He could face, I don't think Dalton Castle's there anymore. I don't know a ton about the Ring of Honor roster, so apologies. But Bryan could wrestle so many goddamn people. Him versus MJF would be nice, because MJF could just cut him down as far as mic work. Bryan versus Kingston would be an oddball tag team. And yeah, I'm going to kind of mention the same. Bryan versus Orange Cassidy, I think, would actually work better than Punk versus Bryan. And then, I don't know about Bryan versus Sting, but I think that you could have Bryan versus Archer, you could have Punk versus Archer. There are a lot of possibilities, and a lot of people are bringing it. Mox, you could run the Mox thing back if you really want to, but I don't know. And Bryan versus Jericho, no, just no. Jericho needs to retire soon anyway, because he hasn't been able to fucking go in the last year and a half. He definitely can't fucking go now. So that's what I got to say about that. Bryan, I'm more excited for what Bryan can do in the ring. I'm more excited to see star power-wise what Punk can bring. Long term, Bryan absolutely brings more to AEW, because they never thought they'd see Punk come back. They wanted to see him come back. I wanted to see him come back, but I also want him to be happy. If he is actually going to come in, if they don't swerve us on this, and they better not. They swerve people on this at this point, with the hints they dropped on the most recent Dynamite, and the way they hyped that, United Censor, United Right to Censor. Yeah, it turns out that Steven Richards actually was a goddamn crackpot just like that. But anyway, if they don't have Punk, show up, whatever, and maybe hype a match with Darby, because they wouldn't need much. You just need a couple weeks for that. It'd be hot-shotting, but it'd be a dream match. You get the dream matches out of the way. And they don't have to appear on every episode of Dynamite. Even having them show up on maybe an episode of Dark Elevation once, not even a month, once every 2 months, gives a boost where, you never know who's going to show up. Other than that, I mean, there are just so many others, so I want to know your thoughts. So who do you think, who would be your dream opponent or list of opponents for Daniel Bryan to face in AEW? Now, I'm going to move on to Adam Hangman Page and Kenny Omega being off the table for AEW All Out. This came from a report from Fightful. Fightful does really good reporting and everything. They really do. And so I trust them because they check with their sources, they recheck with their sources, and they recheck with their sources. I skipped over the second because why not? So, Page versus Omega is off. Now, this is a bit disappointing, and I want to present two sides of the coin. And I'm going to give some examples, so actually this video may end up going longer. But the reason that this stuff with Punk and Bryan, is it's creating all this buzz and everything. Some people may think that might be the reason why they're not going with Punk versus Omega in the main event, because they don't want anything to overshadow Adam Hangman Page winning the championship. Now, I do tend to believe that, because Punk and Bryan, in no disrespect to Page, big goddamn deal, especially with Punk. But also, people have pointed out that Page's wife is pregnant, at least I think wife, or at least fiance, I'm not sure. I don't know their relationship status, none of my business. Congratulations on the upcoming kid. And if that's the case, maybe they want to hold off on that so he can spend some time with they can do a storyline writing him out for a bit after All Out, or whenever she's due. she can spend some time with him like Moxley spent with Renee. Easy for me to say, a simple name like Renee. They had some time. He got to be home, be a father, as one benefit of AEW while they tour. They don't run house shows. At least they're not running that many house shows yet. I think they ran one just before the pay-per-view. And they're doing what they can to give people time off while still presenting a wrestling product. If that's the case, and they want to hold off on that and give Page a chance to be with his newborn, boy, girl, I actually don't know what they're having. Again, none of my business. Then I get that. And if they want to maybe try and get a little bit more mileage out of this and present it at full gear, Colonel, sorry, Derb, if you haven't been watching this, I had to do that. I'm all for them trying to get more out of something, but there is such a thing as doing a slow burn storyline and also doing a storyline where you are trusting that things are going to be as hot as they are right now. Were the fans totally deflated? No, the fans were still into the show on Dynamite, but, it took everything. The heels had to cheat and all that stuff. It's not like Hangman got buried. I'm not going to say that. But they've done this stuff where, yes, he had a quiet, first half of the year. Well, a lot of the first half of the year was quiet because it took them a while to bring in more fans. And now they're back touring and everything, at least for now. Hopefully they will be able to continue to tour. And people can get fucking vaccinated and still mask up and everything and be safe around people. And maybe we can all get through this and we can stop being selfish pricks. Anyway, I work around customer service, and I deal with a lot of that shit. And quite frankly, it's jaded me over the last year and a half. Now, moving on back to the subject at hand. Which hand? Either hand, really. I mean, it's a subject. It's not actually an object. So anyway, if they decide to push this to full gear, I'm all for it. Some people have said they need to stretch it out all the way to Double or Nothing and complete a 3-year journey of like when Adam Hangman Page could not, beat Chris Jericho and didn't become world champion and stuff like that. Wait, yeah, no, that's what it was. It was Double or Nothing. Was it Double or Nothing or All Out? I think it was All Out, actually. The whole point is like he failed to win the number one contendership, basically. That was the deal. And I understand that. God, now I'm confused on my goddamn timeline. I apologize here, but the whole point is Page failed the first time when he tried to go for the championship. That makes sense. Makes real fucking sense. Oh yeah, that's right. No, it was Jericho versus Omega, and then Moxley showed up and did that stuff, and then they did it all out. Okay, I just remember that. Sorry. Watched a lot of fucking wrestling in the last like 2+ years alone. You guys have seen all the videos, especially if you're even a somewhat long time subscriber. So moving on from that, will they be able to keep this as hot? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not saying that I don't trust the parties involved. I mean, I don't really trust Omega to have an interesting title reign, because let's be perfectly honest. Once Omega won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship in that terrific 2 out of 3 falls, no time limit match, I think it was like 65, 67 minutes. Once he beat Okada, tremendous series of matches they had. It was good long-term storytelling. They kind of cooled off on after he had won the U.S. Championship and everything and had that run and then lost it. And then Okada beat Tanahashi to, become he basically broke all the records as IWGP Championship. So, once Omega won, the bloom was off the rose. The matches got more stale. He went on the Jericho cruise. He wasn't really as great of a champion. And I'm not saying he needed to defend it all the time, but it was a popcorn fart, even though the initial response was great. This whole thing of him being champion, it was inevitable. He was obviously going to be world champion. I wasn't a fan of how they did it at first, even though they tried to do all the stuff like in bells and whistles and all that. And yes, Omega's been dealing with injuries. I'm not necessarily feeling this title reign, but I get why they're doing this. So I get why. I'm giving every caveat here because some people tend to think that I'm not an AEW fan when I'm a wrestling fan, and if AEW happens to put on really good stuff, then I'm going to praise AEW as a wrestling company. When it comes to Omega and Page, if they did it all out, it would have been great. They can do it at full gear, and, provided that they're still able to tour and everything, because who knows. If they can get a hot crowd there and they can pull it off there, great. If they swerve people again, they don't do it there. Then you risk burning people out on the whole thing, because then it's going to be like, oh, Page has got to claw his way back. Page has to win the next time he faces Omega. There is no dragging it out. You could drag it out in the territories. You could do this kind of stuff, and you could do that kind of booking, but it's also what led to Dusty having issues back in Jim Crockett Promotions with Luger and Flair and stuff like that. It got to the point where all these dodgy finishes, they led to record gates and then other stuff, but people also started to sour on it because they were like, okay, we've seen this before, we've seen this coming. The stuff with the Elite, I'm not really a fan of. I've never been a fan of the Elite, and I'm just going to say that right now. So, basically, I am for them stretching this out if they do it right. But they also risk cooling Page off to the point that not enough fans are going to buy into it like they are now. They had to be careful with this. I would have had it happen in All Out regardless, but I get why. Do it at Full Gear, have Page win, and then it completes the year-long journey of like when Page couldn't win the number one contenders match there, and then you have Page run with the championship until, say, Double or Nothing. And he wouldn't need it more than 6 months. You don't need to give it to him for like a Mox-like run or even an Omega-like run, because at that point, Omega would have held it almost as long or maybe longer than Mox by that point. Do it at Full Gear and you're fine. Stretch it out further and you're going to have problems. Who will Omega face? Possibly Christian Cage, which, no disrespect to Christian Cage, it's not going to be very good because they hinted at that happening before. And Page will probably fall into this hole again and be morose and stuff like that, but he'll still be with the Dark Order and he'll rise up and he'll be home with his wife and have the kids and that kind of stuff. And that's basically it right there. Those are pretty much my thoughts on that, because I think they have to be careful with it. They have to pull this off in the right way. Because if they don't give Page the championship, if they don't give him the championship at all, if they do what Hogan did when he had Lex Luger beat him for the championship, like on the Nitro, I believe it was August 4th, 1997. They have him, if they have somebody beat Omega just briefly, and then Omega wins the title back, takes bloom off the rose, it doesn't mean anything. Because then Hogan would have held the championship from Road Wild 96, or Hog Wild 96, actually didn't become Road Wild till the next year, all the way until Starrcade 97, when Sting could have beat him cleanly, but he didn't because they decided to fuck it up. They don't fuck it up, they got something. I just worry that they're going to not do it right. It's going to still please some fans, but it's not going to please enough to where Omega will pass the torch, obviously, to Page, but Page's title reign won't be as meaningful. I hope I'm wrong, and I don't mind long-term storytelling, but I'm a little bit leery on this. And also, I just want to say in closing that in regards to my comments, what I said about Nick Gage versus Chris Jericho, let me say that you guys can like whatever the hell you want to like. And if you guys like deathmatch wrestling, that's fucking tremendous. I never said that you guys couldn't. I said in the review, I've said in multiple reviews, you guys can like and watch whatever the hell you want. If deathmatch wrestling is your thing, terrific. To me, it's fucking garbage. I fucking hated it, and it was fucking stupid. And there are rumors, and I'm emphasizing rumors that, some of the sponsors might not be happy, like Domino's with the whole pizza cutter thing during the break, and who knows, there's been like one article that's floated around, and if Domino's actually is upset, I don't blame them. If they're not upset and it's just all a bunch of, bullshit and everything, then okay, it's just people trying to stir shit up. But I wouldn't blame sponsors if they were upset about that, because deathmatch wrestling doesn't belong on cable broadcast television. That's just my opinion. So for those that, understood that I wasn't trying to tell you how to feel, thank you. And if you are offended, well, okay, go do something else then with your life. I mean, I'm just one fan. Just one wrestling fan. I'm not going to apologize for any of the shit I said, because I'm not targeting anybody. I'm just giving my opinions and saying Nick Gage is a garbage wrestler. He has a connection with the fans. Cool. Great. That's fine. Manson had a connection with his cult followers, and look how that ended up. Jim Jones had them drink the Kool-Aid. No, Nick Gage actually doesn't seem like that. Anyway, so I had to get those jokes in. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Yeah, almost 25 minutes, so I was kidding. Let's have some fun, though, in the comments, please. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rethlin. I'll see you soon.